All right. Well, I know that many of our listeners either are just sent their kids back to school. Some of them may have sent some of their kids to college. And so today we are going to be talking about student loans, college planning, and we have Vicki Vollweiler. Yes. So, college financial prep. And at the end of the day, right, you're the founder and CEO of this company that it's really, you have one mission, right, to be committed to helping parents navigate through the unknowns of the college experience and
And to save
maximize,
money.
right, and maximize the out of pocket dollars.
Exactly.
So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
So, talk to us a little bit about what you're doing to disrupt the divorce industry, I guess you could say, from a high level perspective, and then we'll get into all of the nuggets of information to share.
So, I'm a financial aid expert, but I specialize in working with people who are separated, divorced, remarried, blended families, and how it all impacts applying to college and for financial aid.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what was it about this particular area that interested you?
So, I'm a divorced parent myself. I get it from the professional perspective, but I also get it from being a mom. I understand it. And it's great to be able to relate to my clients and to understand all the little intricacies that go with planning for college from a divorce perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things that I want to also just kind of kick off with is so there have been some changes to the FAFSA and how they're looking at it and who's filling it out and all of those kinds of things. So, what we're going to do is kind of go through some of the big questions that people have that you might be sitting here thinking, yeah, but I've got this big question. So, we're going to answer some of those. We're going to give you some examples, some client stories around that. And then we'll wrap up with kind of next steps if you're looking at getting some guidance or direction, and Vicki can share that with you. So let's kick off with the FAFSA. So talk to us
So,
about that.
so in 2024, there was what was called the FAFSA Simplification Act. And most people think, oh, it's the custodial parent who completes the FAFSA. And that had been true until 2024. Now it's the parent who provides more financial support for the student. So there's always the question about, well, which parent is that? And, I can't give each of your listeners, an exact answer for their particular situation. But yeah, it's important to think about who's providing the bulk of the funding for the student. It's not just which parent provides more in child support for the student, but which parent is actually having the larger outlay. So it may be the custodial parent who's providing more when you take into account housing and food and clothes and extracurriculars and whatnot. But it may also be the non-custodial parent who is spending more money. And same thing is true if a household, if parents share 50-50, which one again is providing more financial support?
Well, kind of along those lines, right? I feel like that concept is very broad. How are parents identifying? Because both parties could say, I'm paying more in support and I'm doing all of these other things. What's the benchmark or how are they determining the answer to that question?
To date, and I'm just telling you what I've seen. To date,
Okay.
what I've seen is nobody's diving in and checking all of your financial records. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah. So it's not just who's paying more in support, it's the overall financial contribution that the parties are making.
Exactly.
Okay. Which ties into, like you're saying, the variable expenses. And even for people that are going through divorce, right? We're not necessarily diving in like, well, here's the percentage of your mortgage that is attributed because you have, a child in this. We're not doing that.
I mean, if parents want, they can certainly sit down with spreadsheets and figure it out to the dollar. But no, the colleges aren't going to look at that. Colleges don't want to see anybody's divorce agreement. They don't want to see those details.
Yeah. I always find those updates interesting, right? Because you're like, yeah, there's been this major change, and yet nobody can really define exactly what that means.
Oh, and let me just say this. For somebody that's going, because I just said the schools aren't going to want to see a divorce agreement. In rare situations, if somebody's separated, if there's like this change of circumstance immediately that happens when the child is in college, yes, a college might ask. Well, but they might ask. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. So, as parents are kind of approaching this, right, how do they decide? I mean, really, at the end of the day, how do they decide who is filling out the FAFSA?
I want it to be honest and the person who's providing more financial support. But in an ideal world, hopefully the person that's providing more financial support is hopefully the person who has lower income, because they may benefit more. Now, all of the schools in the country use the FAFSA application, but there are some schools that use what's called the CSS Profile. And that's mainly, I'll say that the 250 or so, it's mostly private universities, like the name brand schools that everybody's heard of, the Ivy Leagues, NYU, Stanford, Boston University. So most of the names that people are familiar with. A lot of those schools will request financial information from both parents. So then ultimately you're showing everything anyway.
Yeah,
So it
absolutely.
really is going to depend on the schools that your student is applying to. And I'll work with families to purposely navigate this and select colleges that may be better for them from a financial perspective.
So, in kind of thinking this through, right? Like at the end of the day, a lot of times people are married filing joint for the year that they may be going through divorce, depending on what their marital status was on December 31st. So, from my perspective, I'm like, okay, they could do it as a joint and they would use that information for that first year, but then it would really come into play subsequent years after the divorce is finalized.
And
And
that's
they're
not a problem.
right.
I always tell clients, file it however is going to be best for you tax wise. And then we can always deal with it on the financial aid side. The question will come up in the financial aid forms, are you married? Are you divorced? What's your status? And you put that in. Or you can file appeals for a change in circumstance. And then they'll ask you for some documentation to prove that, say, you're living in two separate residences or things of that nature. And then they'd
Yeah.
only count the one income.
Yeah. And in FAFSA is something that needs to be completed each year anyways. I'm just thinking, there may be some changes, obviously, as time goes on from what you file the first year. There may be differences, sophomore, junior, senior year, et cetera.
Oh, definitely. And that's why you file it every single year because the schools expect life happens. Of course, there are going to be changes. There could be one year where you lose your job, and the next year you're making three times the amount that you were originally making. So, things change year to year financially, and they look for that.
So I'm sure that you've done a lot of research on this change from 2024. What was the intention behind it, or what was the reason?
The reason was to simplify the FAFSA application. And my running line has been that they made it anything but simple. So while the goal was to simplify it, I mean, they did shorten the amount of questions, but they really just put them in different places to make it appear shorter. Some of the other changes that they made on the plus side, for somebody who has a low income household, they did expand the limits to qualify for a Pell Grant. So that's good. What wasn't so good is they took away, if you had two children in college at a time, the FAFSA would automatically say, oh, you can afford less for each one for college now because you have two children in school at the same time. With the
Hmm.
FAFSA Simplification Act, they took that away. So now you're basically paying double.
Interesting.
Right. And imagine, if you have three kids in college at the same time.
Interesting, right? Oh, goodness. So FAFSA saga continues, but the good news is, working with somebody that is on top of those things can help and being strategic in, like you're saying, which colleges to select that may be more beneficial. And again, going back to who fills it out, I guess it's going to be parties are going to have a conversation and,
And,
you
and
know,
that's something I do all the time. I'll sit down when I can with both parents. Sometimes it's just one, but when I can, I'll sit down with both parents and, almost mediation style where we're talking about all of these topics. The thing about it is, it really is for the best interest of the child, but also I'm concerned about both parents and their future retirement. So the goal is to make it a win 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 for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. That is awesome. So, kind of along those lines, in talking about student loans. So, people fill out the FAFSA, it determines if they qualify, how much they would get, is it subsidized or unsubsidized? So, let's talk a
That's
little bit
just for
about
the student.
students.
So
Yes.
the student can get either a subsidized loan or an unsubsidized loan. Freshmen qualify for up to $5,500 a year, sophomores up to $6,500 a year, and juniors up to $7,500 each year. So if a student qualifies for subsidized loan, which means that they qualified for need-based aid, a portion of that 5,500 or 6,500 or whatever the number is, a portion of that would be considered a subsidized loan, meaning that it does not accrue interest till the student graduates from college. All of the unsubsidized loans, they start accruing interest as soon as you take out the loan and the student's off to college. So the unsubsidized student loans, the Parent Plus loans, those are all unsubsidized.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about that. Anything else related to student loans? Who can take them out?
So both parents can take out student loans. With the big, beautiful bill, there have been changes. There are going to be limits for younger students, starting with class of 2026. It used to be that parents can take out up to the total cost of attendance, can take out the full thing that you needed. And that's not the case anymore. There will still be private loans that are available. So my guess is that instead of most people going to the federal government for all of their loan funding needs, it'll end up being split now between federal and private.
Okay. And kind of along those lines, I know one of the areas that you help with around planning is identifying and maybe even perhaps applying for various scholarships. So let's just take a moment and talk about that, because I think that's a really important part of this conversation.
So, as far as scholarships go, they come in different flavors. You have the scholarships that come directly from the colleges. I'm always going to suggest to everyone the schools that your child is applying to. Check out the website, see what scholarships are listed on there, see what they might qualify for. Certainly check the due dates, look at them early on in the process so that you don't miss any. The due dates are very, very important. But what I tend to meet with clients on is the hard to find scholarships, the private scholarships. I don't want clients to be one in a million, 20 million, 50 million, whatever it is, applying for the COLA scholarship. I want the students to be one of a few that are applying for the scholarship, so there's greater likelihood of winning. I tell the families I work with, I can't guarantee that they're going to win the scholarships, but I can help them find the scholarships where there's greater likelihood of winning. So that's what we do. We sit down together. I sit down with the parents and the student, or parent and the student. I want to dive in and know everything there is about the student, so that way we can find scholarships that not many people are going to qualify for. There are a few that are out there specifically for divorced parents, for single households. A lot of them are need-based, but there are a couple out there that don't depend on need. And a lot of scholarships, like, they don't even have anybody applying. Sometimes if a student qualifies and maybe they say there are 6 requirements and the student has 5, it may still be worthwhile to apply just because they may not
Yeah.
have anyone to give it to. So definitely with those smaller, real niche scholarships, they're out there and it's good to make use of those.
So, kind of along those lines, right? I know that when we think back of when we were in college, oh my gosh, you had to fill out each individual application.
For the
And
scholarships?
now, well, it just as an application of applying to college, scholarships too. Like you had to do each individual college, fill out the application, and now you can fill out one and it'll send. I'm like, this is amazing, right? But has there been anything on the scholarship side, to be able to help facilitate that, or is it still identify the scholarship and apply to each individual one?
So there are definitely bigger databases that may allow you to do that. But the little niche ones that I do, it's all individual. But yes, definitely the Common App where the students are applying to
Yeah.
college, fill in all the schools. And with FAFSA, you can list up to 20 colleges. And the CSS Profile, you can list all the colleges you need. So that is a big help.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the scholarship side, so again, the audience, right, is either preparing for divorce in the midst of it. They've got a lot of stuff that they're working on, right? And so this ends up being one more thing, while very important, that's probably on their mind or on their list of things that they need to help their student with.
Well,
So,
let me say this before people start spending a lot of time on scholarships. What's important to know is the colleges all have different rules that they have regarding scholarships. Some schools don't allow what they call stacking of scholarships, which means if a school, and I'm making up this scenario, if a school gives you $10,000 in financial aid and the student gets a private scholarship of $1,000, the school is going to come back and say, well, now we only need to give you 9,000 because you're getting 1,000. So you did all that work for the $1,000 and then you don't get it. So it's important to check with the colleges to see if they allow the stacking of scholarships before you and your child even put in all the effort.
Got it. No, that makes sense. Is there kind of a process that you suggest as far as like, okay, getting kind of some of the key information in a place where it's a little bit easier to maybe copy and paste some of the logistics to just help any practical suggestions there?
Do you mean for the scholarships?
Yes.
It's similar. They're going to have to write essays. They're going to have to fill out applications. Definitely save the essays because maybe they'll be able to be, used or tweaked for each one. But other than that,
Yeah, absolutely. Goodness, we've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. Talk to me about a client scenario. Let's bring it down to a client story. Talk to us about a client who you've worked with who exemplifies some of the things that we've talked about here today.
okay, I'm going to talk about the most dramatic first.
Yeah.
Divorce situation, domestic violence, police reports, it was an awful situation. Anyway, the student was already in college and it was a school that requires the CSS profile. But the other parent was refusing to fill it out. But based on the situation, there's what's called a non-custodial parent waiver. And, after providing lots of documentation and this waiver, the school ultimately gave them college for free. I mean, it was wonderful. Yeah. So for people that are in horrific circumstances, yes, aid is out there.
I think that's important because, again, as part of, I mean, I know that a lot of the clients that I'm working with, there is this imbalance of power. There's the course of control around the finances. And you may not be able to get them to buy into or even be reasonable about giving the information that they need to. And so, knowing that there could be an option and asking for the non-custodial waiver, which basically gives the party who is willing to participate the ability to do that, right?
Right. Here, and I'll tell you another client story. So this one, parents are not amicable at all, but they both want what's best for their children. This case was twins. While they wouldn't speak to each other at all, they would speak to me. And I managed both parents separately. And we got everything done and both students, we purposely chose schools that were FAFSA only, that didn't require both parents' information, made a huge difference. They still both went to excellent schools, saved lots of money, and it worked out beautifully for them. A third story, both parents are very amicable, or certainly amicable enough when it comes to their children. One is remarried, the other one's engaged. Life is moving forward, all is good. But based on the specific college, based on their financial circumstances and the way things played out, because every school has a different formula. And in addition to the need-based aid, the child also got merit scholarships because of that school. They're on the track to save over $200,000 on the cost of college.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, yeah. There have been some real nice wins over the years.
So, for the people who are remarried, I mean, they're the ones who, for example, are contributing more. Would they be looking then at the household income?
So for schools that require CSS profile, it's possible that you're submitting financial information for up to 4 parents. So
Okay.
yes, FAFSA is going to look at the total household, whether it's a parent and a step parent. They'll ignore the other biological parent, but if they're remarried, they want to know the adults in the household.
Wow. So interesting, right?
I joke around and always tell people, get remarried after the kids are done with college. Don't do it before. I
Right.
was working with a client. So there's a client that, many clients that I work with year after year because financial aid applications need to be done every year. And he was telling me, we were talking about setting up the appointment. Oh, I'm not going to be able to make it till a month from now. I'm getting married in a couple of weeks. No, let's meet now. Don't do it after.
No. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
that's
will
crazy.
impact you.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, I know we've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. Any final words of encouragement for our listeners?
Everybody thinks that they're alone in this crazy scenario and dealing with, not only trying to figure out where your student's future home is going to be, their next step in their educational career, but also the craziness of managing whatever conflict may be going on around the topic, trying to determine who's going to be paying what if they don't already have an agreement. People think they're alone in the process. And let me tell you, you are not alone. So many people are in the same exact situation and predicament. I mean, so much so that I wrote a set of templates because it helps people with the communication just between the co-parents and moving the process forward. There's no tone to it. Nobody can misinterpret anything, but just helping with the process. So yeah, just realize it is a difficult situation. I see it all the time, dealt with it all the time. I have an 11th grader. May end up dealing with it soon. Who
Yes,
knows?
exactly. Exactly. Oh,
But yeah, everything that I do, that I offer is to help control the chaos, reduce the financial worry. One of my clients, there's actually a testimonial that said that she wrote, I helped her sleep better that night.
oh,
Like my goal is not only to help people save money, but it's to reduce that financial worry.
yeah.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's excellent. And I know kind of along those lines, you have a new book out. So talk to us a little bit briefly about that.
Yes. So I have a book that just came out, College Planning for Divorced and Widowed Parents. Maybe wondering how the two tie together. So I'll tell you, I'm a divorced mom, and one of my very close friends is a widowed mom. And while our circumstances didn't come, from the same reasons, we're both single moms. We both have concerns about paying the bills. We both need each other to talk to about stuff. And while she's not necessarily dealing with a former spouse and figuring it out how to pay, there is still lots of similarities. But in the book, you'll find some of the templates I was referring to. I talk about the entire process from picking the right colleges to filling out financial aid applications and looking for scholarships, filing appeals, taking out student loans, the whole part of the process with some more client stories, some words of advice throughout.
Love it. And, the burning question is it available on Amazon?
Yes, it's available on Amazon. Right now, it's on Kindle. By the time you are listening to this podcast, it should be out in paperback, and it's also for download on my website.
Awesome. Well, we will include all of your contact information on the show notes. So be sure to check that out. And I just want to thank you for spending some time sharing your expertise with us today. Love that you are helping not only families, but more importantly, widowed and divorced families navigate through this process. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.